Hey y'all. So we are going to do a study stream, which is going to be kind of boring because I got to read this chapter on situated language, meaning language is contextualized. So I'm back. I'm back. Sorry about that. So we need to go back and work on a question from this chapter. Hi there, y'all. How are you? Hi, y'all. It's going okay, Oregon Valley Girl. I am not feeling the greatest today, so I was considering not even doing a stream, but that seemed a little silly. I'll be right back. Give me just a second. Oh my goodness gracious, y'all. I am so sorry about that. Thank you, y'all, for waiting for me for that technical support. For some reason, StreamYard does not get along with my AirPods. I don't know what that is, but it does not get along. So we're 5 minutes in and we've had 5 minutes of technical issues. Let's look at the question I have to answer. I don't know that I'm going to babble that much, but roast sounds lovely, Oregon Valley girl. I know what else. Am I in space? Is that from all the stars, Robert? I am in space. I am in space. We can make them twinkle more if you want, guys. Not that one. Maybe that one. Yeah, I don't like that one. Which one do you guys like? Not that one. That's too fast. That's too much. No. I think that one. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, y'all. Not disco. Yeah, not disco. Need more pillows. The lights? No, the lights shouldn't make it hard for me to read. I just don't know what I'm doing. I'm having trouble getting the camera set up to my liking, y'all. That's too much. I like them solid. I like them solid. I think Soda's about to come up and visit. Come here. Sorry, y'all. I'm staring at the cat. Here he comes. Here he comes. Y'all will get the cat show. Big stretch. Come on. Maybe he won't come. If I start reading, he'll come. Here he comes. There we get the cat. Look at this, you guys. Yeah, hi. Everybody likes to see you. Everybody likes to see you. Can you guys hear him purring? Not getting much studying done. It's hard to study with a cat in your lap. I'm very not motivated. You guys are supposed to be here to help me motivate. Okay, let's start reading. Is it your kitten, Robert? Or is it just found at home in your patio? I saw you posted the moonrise video, Robert. I haven't had a chance to watch it yet, but I did see you posted it. Yeah. Do you guys see the size of his feet? Look. He's not going to participate. Okay, go on. I know, I called you up here. It just visits. Well, you should put out some food for it. Although if you put out some food for it, it'll think it's home. It's probably getting fed at home too. Hi, big boy. Go on. He is a huge cat. He is a very huge cat. Come here. Give me your hand. I want to show people the size of your hand. Yes, you're a good boy. You're a good boy. Yes. Okay, come on. Move along. Move along. Oh, more kisses. More headbutts, huh? We're getting more situated. This is not moving along. I, sunrise, dawn. How are you guys? I have a cat in my lap. He is a sweet baby. The dog is now getting jealous. Where are you going, Orion? Too many animals, you'd have them come into your door every night? That makes sense, Robert. I understand. It's one of the reasons we don't have outdoor cats is leaving the food out for the outdoor cats makes the possums come, and I do not want possums around. Your orange devil was that calm? How old is your orange devil, Bryce? And welcome. I don't think I've seen you before, have I? I am not feeling well, Sunrise Dawn. I'm wondering if it's because I forgot to take my meds this morning. I took them a couple hours ago when I realized I'd forgotten. I am having a hell of a time concentrating on studying, and Mr. here is not helping. He's not helping. Paolo, 3.5. You're here off and on with all the other streamers. It's nice to see you, Bryce. You have 65 cat Scientology triggers. That's more than Miss Sunrise Dawn, and I thought that she had more cats than humanly possible. Have you met Miss Sunrise Dawn before? Paolo, did you see El Gato? Yes, Robert, I already have them knocking at your door. I understand that. I understand that. It's impossible to catch all the streams, Bryce. Sometimes I feel bad that I'm still listed on the. I really should switch it out and make a channel just for my study streams and a channel just for my Scientology stuff. But that seems silly. Possums are helpful. They eat ticks. Well, that's good. I'm not saying I dislike possums. They're just mean and I don't like them on my back porch because they hiss at me. Ah, Bryce, you're so sweet supporting all the streams. That's really nice of you. Most of those she's had spayed neutered. That's a really great thing, is to spay and neuter stray cats. That's the best. I hope she found a vet who was willing to work for her on that, Sunrise Dawn. Tiger blood. This is Aloha Sun tiger blood. Thanks, Sunrise Dawn. Raccoons are beasts and eat all cat food that's left outside. Indeed, raccoons are something else. Raccoons are something else. They really like cat food, if I recall correctly. Soda, are you done yet? Strawberry, watermelon, peach right now. That sounds lovely, Bryce. He is 22 pounds. He outweighs the miniature dachshund by about 4 pounds. And he's taller by about 4 inches. You guys should be able to hear him purr. He's so loud. He is a big cat. Dad'um cat. Dad'um cat. When I see regular cats, I think them kittens. He be a big cat. We have him and his brother. This is Soda. No, they don't get much exercise except when they're chasing the dog around, and only Soda does that. Our other cat is a brown tabby. He's about the same size, and his name is Scotch. Hi, Jen. How are you? I didn't want to stream over you. When do you think you're going to go live? You see my awful shaving job on the cat, Jen? He's all uneven. Damn big boy. Show off for everybody. Show him how big you are. He is not a grumpy cat. He just looked like a grumpy cat. Okay, Jen. Okay. Trying really hard not to. They're Maine Coon cats. Yes, Sunrise Dawn. We've always done rescues up until these two. And my husband really wanted Maine Coon cats, and so that's what we got. IP cameras for YouTube streaming. I have no idea Scientology triggers. His eyes. What color are your eyes, Soda? I think they're yellow. Can you show him your eyes? Come here, let me see your eyes. Yes, they're yellow with a little bit of green. Yes, that's a good boy. There, you got a good look. He looks like a grumpy cat, but he is. I mean, the dog regularly tries to hump him and has never gotten any response from the cat, except maybe to do one of these, but never with claws out. You don't need to sit on my study book just because it's there. I know it's cardboard, it's paper, so you think it might be cardboard, but you don't need to sit on it. Do you want to be on too? And then I'll start studying. We'll spend 25 minutes with the animals. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. Come here. That's a good boy. Look at you. Him's a good boy. Fix your ear. You look at your fans. Say hi to everybody. Hi. No, stay right here. That's a good boy. That's a good boy. Yes. Say hi. Okay. Him's done. No, he's going to sit in my lap. You want to show? No, you just want to get hugs. Yes, they are all boys. Boop is Snoop for you, Dawn. Here we go. Boop the Snoop. Touch. 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 Come here. Touch. No, you're going to not show off. You're going to not show off. Good boy. Good boy. Yeah. Okay. Go lay down. Not on the book. Not on the vape. Not in the mood. He wants to just lay here. So we're going to read this chapter, y'all. I already read the code switching chapter. So if you were really dying to hear about the code switching chapter, which is the one I thought was going to be the most interesting, then you're going to have to holler and I'm going to have to read it later. But the one we're reading right now is on situated language. So let's see. This chapter is not that long. "20 pages. So it says, language does not occur. I can talk. Really. Language does not occur in a vacuum. It is situated, contextualized. There are speakers and hearers, a time and a place. He is a big cat, isn't he, Paolo? A time and a place, a topic and a purpose. This chapter introduces the main ways in which sociolinguists have tried to describe and make sense of how everyday language is molded by and molds the situation of its usage. We then go on to examine several approaches to how language operates as part of an interaction. The chapter deals with the use of language to do things through speech acts and the ways in which politeness or impoliteness affects how we address another person. It looks in detail at the sociolinguistics of interaction, how that can lead to miscommunication between people, and the ways in which gender dynamics affect conversational patterns, such as turn taking. Underlying this is a concern for the micro detail of everyday conversation that is informed by the methods and theories of anthropology, in particular by ethnographic approaches. Y'all are quiet. What have you guys been doing today? A situation is the extent other than watching streams. I started my day by watching a homeless man pee on the Portland Scientology org. That was so much fun. A situation is the extended social occasion within which speech occurs. Situations are as variegated as human encounters. Card games, ballroom couplings, surgical teams in operation, and fist fights, as Irving Goffman put it in a brief early paper on the neglected situation, 1964. Language is one player in situation, although most situations are not primarily defined by language, but by the shared activity. They may, however, contain conventional language elements, and speech may even be the main activity or prerequisite of what occurs. A committee meeting, a trial in court, a school class are all speech situations. They cannot, in fact, take place without speaking, and speaking that is appropriate to the specific situation. Closely related to situation. Okay, Sunrise Dawn. Closely related to situation is the notion. Guys, I can't even talk today. Closely related to situation is the notion of context. This assumes that a situation consists of two elements: a core event or activity, and the field of action in which it is embedded, the context. Traditionally, these have been treated as two relatively separate components. Goodwin and Durante. An interaction between them has been regarded as essentially one way from context to the language. But sociolinguists became increasingly aware that language itself shapes and reshapes the context, and therefore the overall situation of its own use. Even at the most basic level of what counts as a participant in a situation, language choice can define people as in or out of the frame. In an early phrasing that could represent much of the sociolinguistic work of the early 21st century, a dog is cachorro. Now you're going to make me look, Paolo. Yeah, cachorro. Puppy. Português é difícil, Paulo. Português é difícil. But sociolinguists became increasingly aware that language itself shapes and reshapes the context and therefore the overall situation of its own use. Even at the most basic level, yes, make sure and boob hit the like button on your way in. Yes, Nancy got released last night. Sorry, guys. Really sorry, guys. I didn't mean to do that. I'm trying to get comfy. We can talk about it, Oregon Valley girl. What do you want to talk about? Even at the most basic level of who counts as a participant in a situation, language choice can define people as in or out of the frame. In an early phrasing, that could represent much of the sociolinguistic work of the early 21st century. John Gumpers wrote, sociolinguistic variables are themselves constitutive of socio... Guys, I really can read better than this. John Gumpers wrote, okay, Dawn, I'm sorry you've got a headache. Sociolinguistic variables are themselves constitutive of social reality. Fishman offers a series of questions about language in use in society, which have been widely used as a shorthand of characterizing sociolinguistic situations. So this is a bulleted list. It's really interesting. Let me see if I can show you that bulleted list. Who uses what variety of what language, to whom, when, where, about what, and to what end. It's a yucky day. It is a yucky day. It's supposed to be yucky days all week. I'm not thrilled about that. That's really interesting, you guys. Who uses what variety of what language, to whom, where, no, who uses what variety of what language, to whom, when, where, about what, and to what end. Oh, did they, Dawn? And I know that Nance was on with Natalie at some point today. I haven't seen that yet either, but yeah. I'm a little shocked that she got arrested for boob touching. My prediction is that the charges will be dropped. A good deal of sociolinguistic inquiry can be pursued through these questions. And throughout this book, we address the issues they arise in different guises. Such a series of questions seeks to investigate the norms of language usage. That is to say, the generally accepted social patterns of language use and of behavior and attitude towards language. These questions can be used, for example, to examine the choice between polite and familiar second-person pronouns, a common feature of many languages. The so-called TV pronouns in European languages, for example, French tu versus vous, were the focus of a pioneering study by Brown and Gilman in 1960, which characterized them as encoding solidarity versus power. Very interesting. Fishman also approached context through his concept of domains. The choice of which code to use in habitual situations in a bilingual or multilingual society is not random. Fishman writes about a Belgian official who tends to use one code, standard French, at the office, another, standard Dutch, at his club, and a third, a local variety of Flemish, at home. The domain proposal aims to capture the regularity of these uses without losing the possibility of individual choice and fluctuation. The description here may represent the official's typical code choices, but he will occasionally use Flemish at the office, French at the club, and standard Dutch at home. Note the links between domain and language functions, which I introduced in Chapter 3. Function is a macro-level concept which focuses on how languages operate across a whole nation or society. Domain is a parallel micro-level notion which is concerned with the code choice that individuals or small groups make in particular interactions. Typical combinations of three main elements feed in to make up a domain: the topic of talk, the locale or physical setting, and the expected role relations between participants. Sorry, got. Typical combinations of three main elements feed in to make a domain: the topic of talk, the locale or physical setting, and the expected relations between participants. So it's got a table here characterizing domains. It says, oops, wrong side. Oh my God, you guys. So confusing. So the domain is education. The participants are the teacher and the students. The setting is a school. The topic is coursework. For the domain that's religion, the participants are the priest and the congregants. The setting is the church and the temple, and the topic is religious practice. I got headbutts from the cat, who has left. The dog is still here, but he doesn't go far away. He is my boy. Okay, so table 6.1. The different factors buttress each other, and the likelihood of a particular language code occurring becomes stronger. In the education domain, there is typically a clustering of participants in defined role relationships, teacher and students, meeting in an educational institution and discussing the content of a course of study. In a bilingual society, this educational domain will characteristically favor one language more than other. For example, English in Malawi or Spanish in Mexico. Research has tended to emphasize those domains associated with institutional public areas, such as religion, education, or media. However, the more private situations with family and friends are also included, as Table 6.1 shows. Domains continue to be used as an organizing principle. For example, in Kelly Holmes' 2010 study of marketing language. Situated language has long been the interest of broadly anthropological approaches to sociolinguistics, which provide much of the substance of this chapter. The most comprehensive early proposals came from Del Hymes. Starting with a pioneering article in 1962, he developed a framework which he first called the ethnography of speaking. Ethnography is the core method of social anthropology. It involves a close description of a community's way of life, what they do together, how they interact with each other, how they see themselves in the world. It is mainly the fruit of participant observation. The researcher observes the everyday life of the group through long-term involvement and experience, whether a plateau village in Madagascar or a gang of teenage Latina girls in Northern California. The ethnographer learns the group's language and practices, often over the course of a year or more, and with subsequent return visits. She keeps detailed field notes of what she sees and hears, makes audio recordings, asks questions, probably conducts interviews. They aim to set aside their own preconceptions and to understand the group in its own terms, but also to maintain an independent view on what is found. The result is a thick description which leads to an understanding of the group and its practices, including clarifying in what sense it is a group at all. Blending ethnography into the study of language, Hymes' formulation of the ethnography of communication was typical for the early stages of an academic discipline. He advocated the value of developing a taxonomy, a structured and stratified list of the elements of a communication situation, like that used to classify plants into families, species, and so on. This taxonomy aimed to help the ethnographer of communication observe, specify, and interpret the patterns of a group's communicative behavior. In a series of publications, Hymes offered related, although not identical, listings of the components of the speech situation. The best known and most complete list contains 16 terms, which he groups under 8 hemmings, whose initials form a mnemonic spelling out the word speaking. Many of these components have been mentioned in earlier chapters, and others will come up later. This is no surprise, since they include most of the basic parameters surrounding the use of language. The research activity at the end of this chapter applies the speaking taxonomy to analyzing the classroom situation. Situation consists of the circumstances in which a particular communication occurs. Setting means the physical parameters of time and location. For example, 6 p.m. on a commuter train in New York City. Scene is the culturally defined occasion that is involved. Language happens very frequently at a rock concert compared to a cocktail party. Participants are the people who are taking part in a situation where language is being used. Oh my goodness, we're going through all 8 headings. So the P is participants, or the people who are taking part in the situation where language is being used. Classifying, need a student hat right now. classifying and illustrating participant roles and the part they play in language situations has attracted attention from successive sociologists because participants are arguably the key component of any interaction. I deal with Heim's version of these roles only briefly and return later in the chapter to look at more detailed formulations. Two of Heim's four categories identify the people producing the language. The speaker-sender is the authority behind something that is being communicated, the person responsible for the message. The addresser is the physical producer of the speech, the voice box. The two categories diminish types of receivers. Hearers, audience, who are not being directly targeted, and the addressees, who are. So the E in speaking, ends are the purposes of a particular communication. Himes divides this into two. Outcomes, which are the general goals of an activity within a culture. For example, a university graduation ceremony involves staff and students acting out a rite of passage in front of a supporting audience. So, ends are the purposes, outcomes. Goals, on the other hand, are individual participants' intentions in relation to the overall event. For example, family members who come to support a graduate. The difference between outcomes and goals is most obvious when there is a clash between the general and the individual purposes. This doesn't sound on topic at all, does it, y'all? Say a political dispute is underway between students, and university management and some students at the graduation ceremony voice their protest. Then their goals differ from the outcome and from the goals of most other participants. The importance of participants' goals in communication has been a particular interest of social psychologists of language. The A in speaking is the act sequence. And the act sequence involves two components, the message form and the message content. The message form covers the way things are said. The message content is what is said. Different groups will often trigger different ways of speaking. We discuss road deaths differently from local gossip. Key is the manner or tone in which something is presented. What is superficially the same thing may be said in different ways. Conversationalists, like actors, can impart to a line widely different readings through different keyings. The most obvious manifestation of key is when the way something is said subverts the meaning so that it becomes the opposite of what the surface of the words appear to intend. That is, irony. A change of key is often marked in the intonation. In English, that's brilliant. With a falling tone, with a falling intonation is criticism. The opposite of the same exclamation with a neutral rise-fall intonation. That's brilliant. Interesting. Instrumentalities down to the I include the channels by which the language is carried, such as writing versus speak or sung versus spoken. This has become an increasingly important dimension as technological change has created new communication media, especially through the many affordances of the internet. Forms of speech covers the repertoire of codes that are available to speakers in a community, which we talked about in Chapter 5. Norms are the rules governing the production and interpretation of a language in a situation. Norms of interaction are the community's rules for communication and are most easily visible when someone breaks them. For an example, in an encounter between two contrasting cultures. They include such things as when it is appropriate to take a turn at speech and when to keep silent. For example, Athabascans leave more silence between speaking terms than do mainstream North Americans. Such rules for turn-taking in conversations are studied in particular detail by conversation analysts. The norms of interpretation, the N in speaking, show how interactants interpret each other's practices. When Athabascans and mainstream North Americans interact, both follow their own norms for silence after each turn. The Athabascans find the others rude or dominating because they themselves can never get a word in edgewise. The others think the Athabascans are sullen or superior because they will not talk. Both groups end up confused and frustrated by each other. Genres involve the language associated with a particular kind of speech event. A story, a job application, a blog, and so on. Different genres have different rules for language choice and use. New technologies create new genres, most obviously in the burgeoning of internet forms. Genre is a slippery concept which eludes easy definition, but which many analysts have found indispensable to understanding language use. The research activity later in the chapter offers the chance to apply and evaluate Himes' taxonomy. In the process, it will become clear that some of the terms are overlapping, obscure, counterintuitive, or simply selected to fit the mnemonic. Despite this, Himes' listing serves as a wide range where sociolinguists may browse and find something appropriate and usable for their analysis. Later sociolinguists have adapted this kind of taxonomy for their own purposes. For example, Scullin and Scullin's Grammar of Context in Intercultural Communication. Applied judiciously and perceptively, the analysis of such components makes a good starting point for understanding how language works in specific situations. Speakers in situ. I need to check what situ means. Hold on. Situated. Okay. So, situated speakers. Earlier, we saw briefly how Himes, as a part of his speaking taxonomy, distinguished just two speaker and two hearer roles. A more detailed approach comes from Irving Goffman, the sociologist of everyday life. Goffman's construct of the interaction order was an important influence on sociolinguistic approaches to speaking situations, and in his later work, he himself engaged extensively with sociolinguistic issues. In an essay on footing, Goffman laid out what he called the production format in which speakers operate, recognizing three speaker roles. The animator is the voice box, the author is the strategist who formulates the message, and the principal is the authority behind the words. Okay, Sunrise Dawn. Goffman thus splits. I really wish there were a way to freaking like comments. There's ways to like super chats, but guys, can you imagine if there was ways to like regular comments? Wouldn't that be amazing? Like Reddit does, you could upvote comments. I think that would be great. Goffman thus split Time's role of sender into two. In the default case of ordinary face-to-face conversation, the speaker is the sole first person, playing all three of Goffman roles simultaneously. But even these prove to not be fine enough for the complexities of many institutional production formats, especially in mediated communication where a fourth role is required. You had to look that up. Taxonomy, the branch of science concerned with classification. Yeah, so they're trying to classify the language. In my own research on the generation of news language, I subdivided the author role again to allow for the fact that there can be numerous authors, but not all of them play the same function towards the text. The principle is the institutional authority behind a speech or text whose position or stance is being expressed. There is an initial author who originates the first draft of a news story, but that story then passes through the hands of a number of editors who process and modify the text until it is presented or published in its final form by the animator. These rules can be applied to the analysis of language events of all kinds, including internet texts. The straight listing of roles implies a linear chain in which Table 6.3 looks like a production line from principal to auditor to editors to animator. But what is going on can better be regarded. What is going on can better be regarded. You guys see my adorable Winnie the Pooh lip mask? Got it from ColourPop. It also came with a matching sugar scrub. See, there's a sugar scrub. There's the sugar scrub. Anyhow, my lips are getting dry, so aren't they adorable, Oregon Valley Girl? I had to have them. They came. Jules Fire Rocks, it's good to see you. How are things going on the internets today, dear? We are reading about language embedded in context. Not Beauty Pie, but I do love Beauty Pie. Those were ColourPop. I got some eyeshadows from ColourPop, and they had a Winnie the Pooh collection not too long ago, and so I got it from ColourPop. Mandy, sweetie, how are you? It's been a very interesting topic. There have been many points so far with it where the subject has been appropriate to what we're going through in community right now. So the straight listing of roles implies a linear chain. The straight listing of roles, here are the roles, guys. Yes, it is very relevant to Scientology, these two chapters, Jules. Most of us on SBTV regularly communicate with people all over the world, US, Canada, UK, and Europe. Also, Scientology has their own language. Regional and cultural differences screw apparent intentions. Exactly, Scientology triggers. Exactly. The straight listing of roles implies a linear chain, which in Table 6.3 looks like a production line from principal to author to editors to animator. But what is going on can better be regarded as an embedding or layering or nesting of one role within the next rather than as a line, as Goffman noted. To illustrate again through the news process, each separate role in fact represents its own distinguishable speech event, which could be characterized using the full apparatus of Heim's speaking taxonomy. Journalists work in a particular setting with particular purposes and norms of interaction. They pass a text to copy editors who are working in their own different situations, then on to news readers in theirs, and so on. And each of these situations and the resultant text is embedded within the next. Clearly, such a detailed description would be large and cumbersome, but traces of the many layers sometimes show in the finished product, the published text. When a story published in New Zealand describes a location as 129 kilometers west of London, we can safely deduce that the original said 80 miles, but the copy editors have neglected to round up the conversion to 130 kilometers. Yeah, I'm fine, Sunrise Dawn. I'm fine. Come back if you can. We will miss you. The concept of embedding is in. Let's see, give me a second here, guys. You too, sweetie. You too. They pass a text to copy editors who are working in their own different situation, then on to news readers in theirs, and so on. Each of these situations and the resultant text is embedded within the next. Clearly, such a detailed description would be large and cumbersome, but traces of the many layers sometimes show through in the finished product, the published text. Okay, we said that about New Zealand. The concept of embedding is extraordinarily important for understanding how a lot of both everyday conversation and mediated language production work. Goffman describes the layerings or laminations which speakers routinely introduce into their talk as they recount stories or incidents about themselves or others. The production format of the story scenario is embedded into that of the story's telling. Each such embedding changes the speaker's footing, their alignment or set or stance or posture or projected self. Contemporary sociolinguistic work also focuses on how speakers take up different footings. For example, in the course of a U.S. presidential campaign, where inconsistency or flip-flopping of candidate stances may itself become an issue. Bakhtin has maintained that much of our spontaneous speech consists of words that come from the mouths of others, and this is nowhere more evident than in news discourse. Most news is based in talk. The information that journalists write up is gleaned mainly from interviews and documents. Fragments from these texts are embedded into the story, most obviously as written quotations or audio and video clips. As a result, the news story you read or watch consists of a set of textual laminations, which would be almost impossible to unravel to its origins. CUL Blue, he is a Maine Coon cat. .4. We're halfway, guys. Almost halfway. Speakers require listeners. The audience makes up the complementary dimension of language interaction, the second and third persons of the pronoun paradigm. We saw in Table 6.2 how Himes distinguished between addressees and a wider set of hearers who are not being addressed. Goffman, however, points out that an utterance does not carve up the world beyond speaker into precisely two parts, recipients and non-recipients. He makes finer distinctions between ratified and unratified participants. Building on Goffman's proposals, I developed a set of rules as part of the audience design framework, systematizing and labeling them as in Table 6.4. Audience design treats the speaker, the first person, as the primary participant at the moment of speech, qualitatively apart from interlocutors. interlocutors. It then ranks the audience roles according to whether or not the persons are addressed, ratified, or known by the speaker. The main audience role is the second person, the addressee, who meets all three criteria: known, ratified, and addressed. Other present third persons may be licensed to participate, but they are not directly addressed. I term these auditors. Beyond them, talk has a wider audience of unratified third parties. Those whom the speaker knows to be present, but who are not ratified participants in the conversation, are overhearers, parties within innocent earshot of the conversation. Other parties whose presence is unknown to the speaker are eavesdroppers, whether they are intentionally and maliciously hiding behind the arras, or whether they hear by chance because they just happen to be within earshot but out of spite. The specific configuration of these roles and relations during any given utterance is, to use Goffman's term, the participation framework of that moment of talk. We should really talk about the participation framework of this moment of talk. That's interesting. These four audience roles are implicationally ordered according to their status as addressed, ratified, and known. Often in an interaction, the physical distance of audience members from the speaker coincides with their role distance, with the addressee physically closest and the eavesdropper furthest away. Audience roles are assigned by the speaker, and visual criteria such as physical placement, body orientation, or direction of gaze are often crucial to identifying who is who. The difference between these audience roles have significant sociolinguistic repercussions. We have seen in preceding chapters how speakers choose their language code depending on who their specific addressee is. This is the most obvious when the repertoire is multilingual rather than monolingual. In a bilingual group, the language you choose to use may, in fact, be enough to nominate who it is that you are addressing. Gal reports an instance from her Oberwart study where two younger people in a farm kitchen were joking together in German. The young man switched out to Hungarian when he wanted to ask his mother something. The change in language choice briefly and directly reclassified the mother as his addressee, whereas she had been just auditor to the German conversation of the younger ones. One case where production and audience roles quickly became very complex occurs with translation or interpretation from one language to another. Vigouroux describes the role and footing complexities involved in a Pentecostal church service for Congolese migrants in South Africa, where the pastor's French language sermon must be simultaneously translated into English. Within a monolingual code, speakers can adjust their pronunciations very finely to cater for changes in audience. We return to these kind of styling abilities in Chapter 11. Chapter 11. Styling language and identities. That's interesting. Okay, second, let's take a break from that for a moment and talk about this issue from Anthropology News. Sorry, all my daughter's texting me. Y'all got really quiet. It's because I stopped talking? Okay, let's go back. Just quiet today? Okay. That's fine, Oregon Valley girl. I just want to make sure it's not because I got all quiet. Oh, Dawn, that sucks. Do they offer a way to renew it online, or do you have to go into the store? You guys, I'm so tired. Language choice can be influenced not just by the addressee, but by the outer audience roles, the auditor and the overhearer. It is common practice in many bilingual communities for even a single monolingual speaker joining a group, thus becoming an auditor, to trigger a switch by the whole group to the monolingual's language so as to include the person as a participant. Continuing use of a language that one participant does not understand would define the uncomprehending hearer as unratified outside the group. Even overhearers can have this kind of effect on speakers' language choice. Yes, I hate the unexpected. I hate the I can't talk English today. I hate the unexpected expenses. Unexpected expenses. Gee, willikers, you guys. And the sun is out. It is probably still cold out, so I'm not going to go outside, right, guys? Not going to go outside because it's still cold and I don't feel good. It's 56 degrees. I've got a heater out there, but I should stay. I need to not change things. Even overhearers can have this kind of effect on speakers' language choice. Gumpers found an absolute overhearer determined rule operating in bilingual Slovenian German community in southwestern Austria. So strong is the injunction against speaking Slovenian in mixed company that tourists can live in the village for weeks without noticing that any language except German is spoken. But overhearer-oriented choices are generally less determined. Gall and Dorian record identical incidents from their two communities, but with opposite results. In Oberwart, a group of bilinguals at an inn switched from Hungarian to German when overhearers at a nearby table requested it. But in East Sutherland, a group of bilinguals in a bar refused a similar request to switch from Gaelic to English. I'm sorry your brain and your body aren't working together. My brain and my body aren't working together either. Hey, Maddie, how you doing? It is good to see you. Just as media situation complicates the roles we need to describe the language producers, so it complicates the audience roles through the kind of embedding discussed earlier. Since each interaction situation becomes embedded inside of the next, audience roles as well as speaker roles are laminated. A concert performance in front of a live audience can be broadcast in real time or recorded. The live performance is a situation with its own full set of audience roles. When that performance is then broadcast, embedding it in the mediated situation, the wider audience generates its own further set of roles. This can lead to trouble. The concert becomes technologically available to an audience which includes groups who were not targeted in the live event. Through mass media, everyone may become overhearers. And through the internet, everyone is potentially an eavesdropper, unaddressed, unratified, unknown, but there, as many have discovered to their cost. I think he's talking about lurkers. Unaddressed, unratified, unknown. Lurkers. Any of y'all lurking? I think everybody here's talking. Speech, not that there's anything wrong with lurking. I was a lurker for a really, really long time. Speech acts and politeness. Speaker and audience roles are central to the study of speech acts. The abiding interest in the field of pragmatics, which is one of sociolinguistics' nearest disciplinary neighbors. Pragmatics focuses on language use and users. In its narrowest definition, it is concerned with those aspects of the context of communication that get encoded in the language itself. Most obviously, dialectics. What is dialectics? D-I... Define... D-E... I-C-T-I-C-S. Deictic. More broadly, let's see. Pragmatics focuses on language use and users. In its narrowest definition, it is concerned with those aspects of the context of communication that get encoded in the language itself. Most obviously, deictics, such as pronouns, whose she means in a discourse can only be specified by reference to the context. More broadly, pragmatics deals with the many ways in which discourses are internally organized and related to their contexts. Its interests therefore overlap with much sociolinguistic work on syntax and discourse. Nope, not didactic, Dawn. Deictics. D-E-I-C-T-I-C-S. Not didactic. It means relating to or denoting a word or expression whose meaning is dependent on the context in which it is used, such as here, you, me, that one, there, or next Wednesday. Deictic. So the sentence again It is concerned with those aspects of communication that get encoded in the language itself. Most obviously, deictics, such as pronouns, who she means in a discourse can only be specified by reference to the context. More broadly, pragmatics deals with the many ways which discourses are internally organized and related to their contexts. Its interests therefore overlap with much sociolinguistic work on syntax and discourse. The study of speech is founded on the work of British philosopher J.L. Austin. In 1955, he presented his central ideas as the William Jones Lectures at Harvard University, although he died before these were published in 1962. His How to Do Things with Words is a book written with that shining clarity of style which some philosophers have achieved on difficult linguistic subjects. Speech acts are performatives, Austin argued, utterances that actually perform the action they express. If I say, I promise to pick you up at midday, just by saying the verb promise, I perform the act of promising. Austin suggested that while statements can be true or false, I picked you up at midday, no you didn't, yes I did, performatives can be either happy or unhappy. That is, they have to meet certain felicity conditions, such as the right configuration of participants. Consider the words, I pronounce you husband and wife. In most countries, the condition for happy performance of this kind of utterance are severely restricted. The law prescribes who is allowed to say it, a limited set of qualified celebrants, who it can be said to, where it can be said, and even the attitude of the couple. Austin distinguished three aspects of the speech act. The locutionary act is the activity of uttering the appropriate wording. The illocutionary force denotes what act is performed through the utterance, such as complimenting or requesting. The perlocutionary effect indicates what the act actually achieves with its hearer, an apology accepted, an offer taken up. The difference between the locutionary and illocutionary act is important. Many different forms of wording can be used to express the same illocution. I ask you to do X may be the most overt form of requesting in English, but phrases such as would you please are the more common locutions. Austin found that his initial distinction between constantives and performatives could not be easily sustained. Constantives are statements. Austin found that his initial distinction between constantives, statements, and performatives could not be easily sustained. This opened the way for John Searle, a student of his, to develop a general theory of speech acts in 1969, including dividing them into 5 classes. Assertives, or representatives, such as to state or describe. Directives, order, permit, request. Commissives, promise, pledge. Expressives, thank, apologize. Declarations, appoint and declare. Pragmatic scholars and philosophers approach speech acts quite abstractly, using invented examples to illustrate points, but sociolinguists engage with them as they occur in natural language data. Apologies, compliments, and complaints offer a very obvious zone for investigating the social workings of language. The earliest research counted and compared the number of particular speech acts used by different groups along with their topics and functions. Much of that work focused on gender language differences in English. See exercise 6.11. Ooh, do you guys want to get to the gender and conversation section? That's interesting. We've only got 5 pages to go and not much time. In many speech acts, the exact configuration of participants is crucial to the success or interpretation of the discourse and interaction, bringing us back to the detail of speaker and audience roles laid out earlier. Some speech acts may be incomplete unless the addressee responds appropriately. I bet you is successful only if the addressee accepts the bet. When a complaint is produced before an auditor, that person functions as witness to the complaint, and their response helps determine what the outcome will be. Researching interactions with a Montreal family, LaForest found that the auditor witness usually affiliates with the complaint and so collectivizes it, but also works to ensure this situation does not deteriorate too far. Even an unratified overhearer lurking unintentionally on the edge of an interaction may play a role, for example, inducing a speaker to mitigate an uttered threat. But researching speech acts does raise issues for sociolinguists. Real recorded data is much less tidy than constructed examples, and it can be difficult to decide which speech act is being performed. Very many locutionary acts seem to perform more than one illocution at the same time, and often apparently deliberately so. Is "how do you feel about coming with me" a question, a request, or an offer? Or is the speaker relying on just that ambiguity to hedge her positioning between imposing on the hearer or exposing herself to a face-threatening refusal? Researchers are now very conscious that speech acts are multifunctional, that they need to take a thorough account of the wider discourse and context in which they occur in order to interpret their meaning, and that the same speech acts may operate differently in different languages and societies. Politeness. A major strand of the pragmatic approach to language and use, especially speech acts, is the politeness model proposed by Brown and Levinson. That term, unfortunately, conjures up everyday perceptions of polite society, etiquette, and manners, but here it receives a broader definition. The central construct is face, a person's public self-esteem, which Brown and Levinson take over from Goffman's analysis of relations in everyday life. Building on common notions like losing face and saving face, they distinguish 2 dimensions. Positive face is a person's desire to be actively appreciated. Negative face is the desire not to be imposed on. Behavior that caters to the first desire is positive politeness, and to the second, negative politeness. Central to the approach is the notion of the face-threatening act and the many ways in which interactants handle these. Obvious face-threatening acts include warnings and commands, but gentler speech acts such as requests and advice also embed latent threats to the hearer's negative face. Face-threatening acts can be classified on whether they threaten speaker or hearer and their positive or negative face. An apology constitutes a threat to the speaker's own positive face, since it applies a past shortcoming of theirs. An FTA is said to be on record when a clear single intention is obvious behind it, while for off record the intention remains ambiguous. The most direct, bluntly expressed FTA is bald, sit down, compared to the many redressive actions by which speakers mitigate the face threat, Please pull up a chair, or won't you take a seat? The politeness model has triggered a great deal of sociolinguistic research over more than 30 years in many cultures, languages, and genres, often focusing on gender differences. It has also faced many refinements and challenges. Probably the main issue has been Brown and Levinson's original claim to universality. Their subtitle was Some Universals in Language Use. In particular, face wants are not necessarily the drivers of politeness in all cultures. An ongoing site for research on the nuances and relationship of politeness and face is the use of honorific forms in Japanese, by which levels of respect are encoded in grammatical forms such as prefixes. The sociolinguistics of interaction. Sociolinguistic research into speech acts involves attention to the fine detail of how participants interact in everyday situation. Hey, Mama, how are you? It's good to see you. What's new in your life? We are reading my sociolinguistics chapter. So I'm reading, people are being quiet. It's a laid back Sunday afternoon. Trying to get my homework done, trying to get to the portion in this chapter that talks about gender in situated language. I hope you're doing well. Sociolinguistic research into speech acts involves attention to the fine detail of how participants interact in everyday situations. It forms a part of a wider interest in how we make ourselves and our communicative intentions understood in daily interaction. That's great. I'm really glad you're good, Mama. I haven't been feeling well today, although I'm thinking I realized about 5 hours ago that I didn't remember to take my morning meds. And so I think I'm feeling good now that I've taken my morning meds a couple of hours ago. This was the pioneering work of John Gumpers, whose name is inextricably linked with Delheim's because of their co-editorship of the foundational Directions in Sociolinguistics collection. But their work, approaches, and contributions were very different. Himes saw the big picture of the emerging field. Hey, Susan. Taxonomizing and theorizing and presenting little empirical language analysis of his own. Gumper's focus was micro, as my Chapter 5 discussion of his research on code switching showed. He examined the minutiae of everyday conversations and how these functioned to enable individuals to communicate and understand one another. His interactional sociolinguistics was hands-on rather than programmatic. Gumper's work relates, often quite explicitly, to several of the approaches presented in this chapter. Goffman's interaction order offered a framework for studying everyday social dealings for which Gumper's looked to work out principles specific to language use. Gumper's also built on the thinking of speech act philosophers such as Austin and Searle, and particularly the approach of H.P. Grice. Grice had developed the cooperative principle, which spelt out 4 maxims for the conduct of conversation. That contributions need to be informative, true, relevant, and clear. Yes, but they're giving us, a lot of this is giving us, because it's an introductory class, even though I'm a graduate student, they're trying to give us the frameworks and the history. Gumper's consideration of what was below the surface of conversations grew on Grice's other main construct, conversational implicature. He took the proposals of the philosophers and sociologists and operationalized them for actual everyday conversation. Gumper's leading concept was the contextualization cue, presented in his foundational book, Discourse Strategies. Contextualization cues are constellations of surface features of message form, by which speakers signal and listeners interpret what the activity is, how semantic context is to be understood, and how each sentence relates to what precedes or follows. They offer overt clues to what is otherwise only presupposed or implied below the surface of a conversation. The cues can be of almost any linguistic and non-linguistic kind. Vocabulary, phonology, syntax, code switching, use of formulae, and particularly the intonation patterns or prosody. The function to key the interpretation which the speaker expects the hearer to reach. They function to key the interpretation which the speaker expects the hearer to reach. At the start of an interaction, a speaker and a listener will spend some time negotiating the basis of continuing conversation. In this process, the interpretive weight placed on contextualization cues is much greater than their surface linguistic importance. If the interactants coordinate successfully, they have achieved conversational synchrony and move forward in tune with each other. That's interesting. I wonder how much that relates to the lag between me talking and y'all responding. Okay, Dawn. Take care of yourself, dear. Feel better. I totally understand. My brain is not functioning, but I've got to get through this today. So I really appreciate those of you who are hanging out with me. But if interactants do not share a common set of contextualization cues, trouble follows. Which part did you miss, CUL Blue 64? Did you miss me answering your question about the cat? The cat is a Maine Coon cat. Miscommunication brings to the surface presumptions that are usually hidden. Gumper's focused on such misfires, investigating communication problems and seeking to interpret where, how, and why such breakdowns had occurred. Much of his early empirical work looked at interactants who share the same language but come from very different background cultural situations, such as Indian speakers of English in conversation with British or American speakers. He analyzes in depth one employment counseling interview between a white British counselor and an Indian teacher, which lasts over an hour in a state of continual misunderstanding and increasing conflict. Their purposes for the conversation clash in the matter of goals, heims, and outcomes situation. Contextualization clues are central to the communicative competence of speakers. Recall Dorian's characterization of the interpretive skills of semi-speakers in her Gaelic community. Many of these cues are subtle, specific to subgroups, and learned through long-term, face-to-face interaction with in-group members. But the very absence of these skills contributes to limiting the amount and kind of contact that would produce their acquisition by the outsider. Gumper's wider research interest was in the sociopolitical repercussions of these kinds of cross-cultural misunderstandings, though his legacy is in many ways the least sharply defined of the sociolinguistic founders. Interactional sociolinguistics is the name given to a body of work that is built on Gumper's methods. Sorry, guys. It shares not so much a cohesive theory as a methodological conviction that the detailed workings of everyday conversations are interactionally important. This it has in common with the fine-grained methods of conversation analysis. It is fed into the approaches of sociolinguists whose work we have discussed earlier, such as Gall, Levinson, Heller, and Auer, some of whom were Gumper's students. Best known as Deborah Tannen, a collaborator with Gumper's on the development of contextualization cues, whose study of conversational style is a comprehensive application of interactional approach. It analyzes talk over a dinner for American Thanksgiving among 6 friends in California. 3 came from New York, 2 from California, and 1 from England. The New Yorkers had what Tannen called a high involvement style, fast and simultaneous speech, rapid questions, quick turn-taking. This left the other 3 participants, who had high considerateness style, feeling dominated and sidelined. In Heim's terms, there was a clash of norms. Gender and conversation. We're almost done, guys. Such research in communicative cross purposes led Tannen to publish books like You Just Don't Understand, which popularized the role of gender difference in conversation to the broader American and international public, particularly with their contrast between men's report talk and women's rapport talk. This was part of an upsurge on sociolinguistic work on gender and language, one strand of which treated gendered distinctions in language as a form of cross-cultural difference. Extending Gumper's approach into cross-gender communication, Maltz and Borker treated American boys and girls as being socialized into different worlds. What we are suggesting is that women and men have different cultural roles for friendly conversation, and that these rules come into conflict when women and men attempt to talk to each other as friends and equals in casual conversation. Early research examined differences, for example, in speech acts such as compliments in English. The general findings were that women give and receive more compliments than men. Rees-Miller repeated such studies in the United States decades later. In unstructured settings, compliments by women to women were largely about appearance, while male-to-male compliments on appearance were very rare. Most compliments between men were about performance, 64%, particularly in sport. A second approach takes a deficit line. The earliest gender language research implied that a woman's language is in some ways deficient rather than just different. Robin Lakoff's short book, Language in Women's Place, 1975, focused on language forms which indicated subservience and she believed were typical of women's English rather than men's. For example, pragmatic markers, you know, sort of, tag questions. Isn't it? Can't we? Intensifiers. So much, just great. Empty adjectives. Sweet and adorable. Precise color terms. Beige, lavender. While her book was the foundation of gender language studies, Lakoff was soon criticized on at least 3 grounds. Aspects of her approach implied women's deficiency. The linguistic forms were not all neatly distributed according to gender, and their functions were much more variegated than just indicating lack of confidence. Many of these are typical Gumper's type contextualization cues, the pragmatic lubricant which eases the course of conversation, while others are politeness news which attend to an interlocutor's face needs. And it was not long before feminist sociolinguists questioned why women's language should be regarded as the deviation from men's language rather than vice versa. The third approach views gender language as involving dominance. Lakoff's explicit statements on the matter make it quite clear that she believed the root cause of the deficiencies was in fact dominance. The ultimate effect of these discrepancies is that women are systematically denied access to power on the grounds that they are not capable of holding it, as demonstrated by their linguistic behavior along with other aspects of their behavior. Gender differences, both in language and generally in society, are not random or neutral alternatives. Gender itself is a significant form of social stratification. There is no known society where women have more power than men. That power relation often surfaces in the patterns of conversation. In an article on the work women do in interaction, Pamela Fishman found that women provided most of the support in conversations with their partners. For example, they asked 3/4 of the questions. On the other hand, men did 3/4 of the interacting in West and Zimmerman's research on the small insults embodied in conversational interruptions. It was not long before Abar and Atkins in 1980 concluded, on the basis of comparing male and female witnesses in court, that it was not a matter of women's language, but of powerless language. Gender language research is now a large and varied field, and we return to different facets of it in the following chapters, including nuancing the definition of gender and how it is enacted. We will also see that the deficit difference dominance paradigms apply as well, not surprisingly, to other dimensions of social differentiation, particularly ethnicity. Okay, guys, 4 more pages. Y'all still here with me? The case of slang in Rio. The South Zone is the wealthiest area of the Brazilian megacity of Rio de Janeiro. Thanks, Susan. It has spectacular hills and beaches and the most expensive real estate in South America. The gender differences, Oregon Valley girl, it is interesting. It is also the location of a number of favelas, shanty towns. These side-by-side contrasts of rich and poor have, as so often, an ethnic and gender reflex. Poor Black young men in the area are some of Brazil's most disenfranchised citizens, according to an ethnographic study by the American sociolinguist Jennifer Roth Gordon in 2007. You're asleep? I'm going to sign off in a few minutes, guys. This is the first Minnesota goodbye. Research into language of disadvantaged Black male urban youth. Yes, Oregon Valley girl. Sorry, I'm picking at my lips. They're making me nuts. And the Portland Squirrel Squad is texting me. Research into the language of disadvantaged black male urban youth has a long tradition in sociolinguistics, stretching back to pioneer studies in the 1960s of New York City teenage gangs. The methods needed to research language in such situations are necessarily ethnographic. Researchers have to win access to and earn the trust of the people they wish to work with. Roth Gordon's approach was typical of a linguistic ethnographic study in its use of multiple data sources, long-term involvement, and collaboration with the participants. She interacted with her informants over a period of 18 months. Data collection began with written surveys and interviews at a high school. This led on to recording casual conversations with a peer group, the central data pool of the project. One group member acted as the researcher's mentor, guide, and interpreter to the group and its language. He reviewed the recordings, identifying and translating target expressions from the Portuguese, which made participants' intuitions and judgments central to defining the data of the study. Finally, the researcher took selected excerpts from the recordings and played them back to different groups: the participants themselves, their parents, other adults, and middle-class youth. My phone's going wild, y'all. The Rio de Janeiro study focused on the role of guerrilla or slang in the marginalization of these. Paolo is gone. I bet you Paolo's not here. The Rio de Janeiro study focused on the role of guerrilla or slang in the marginalization of these young men of the favelas, and specifically on the role of 4 pragmatic markers in guerrilla, sometimes also called discourse markers or pragmatic particles. These are the small bits of language which provide much of the discoursal and interactional glue that hold our conversations together. In English, expressions like all right, actually, I mean, and so on pepper our conversation, constantly signposting the structure and significance of what we say and the way in which we want to relate to our interlocutors. They are, in Gumper's terms, some of the leading contextualization cues. Ethnographic, qualitative methods are suited to researching these kinds of linguistic forms, which require a situation where speakers are at ease and analysts can retrieve enough context to interpret the usages. But there is a sociolinguistic issue here as well as a pragmatic one. The markers are often denigrated, especially in the speech of non-mainstream groups. They change frequently and spread quickly and are commonly despised by, older people as sort of indicative of the inadequate language skills of, like, younger people. There can be little doubt, however, that these critics will themselves be using pragmatic markers in their own conversation. Everyone does. The outsider groups routinely described the guerrilla user's speech as incomprehensible and pointed especially to their high use of several pragmatic markers that are both textual and interactional. Roth Gordon studied 4 examples: sound words, obscenities, address terms, and addressee-oriented tags. Example 6.2 shows multiple occurrences of the first 3 of these. We will look at just 2 of them. Sound words are in fact non-words, phonologically graphic expressions that also have been studied in other languages such as Greek, where they are frequent in narratives. Most sound words imitate noises of contact or conflict, like bam or pa, often preceded or followed by a pause in Giriya. They behave almost like spoken commas, punctuating narratives and foregrounding new and important information. Those loud, fast-spoken items are widely used in the male peer group, although speakers of standard Portuguese would not even regard them as words. The parents and middle-class Brazilians whom Roth Gordon surveyed for comment know that these are part of stigmatized Giriya speech and say that they hamper the coherence of the discourse. Since the function of the pragmatic markers is to do just the opposite, to organize and structure discourse, the perception of incoherence appears to be a reaction to the speakers rather than to their speech. Addressee-oriented tags are among the most common interactional devices in language, classically in English, you know. The most distinctive addressee-oriented tag in Giriya is "Tá ligado," "Are you connected, paying attention," which has been popularized by Brazilian rappers to reference Black unity and political consciousness. It therefore functions both linguistically and sociopolitically in the same way as two pragmatic markers in African American vernacular English, "ait" and "namin." However, the salient thing for listeners is not so much that Giriya speakers use their own distinctive addressee-oriented tags as the frequency with which they use the standard tags, particularly sabe, you know. Some of the outsiders that Rothgarden surveyed described slang speakers as speaking one normal word for every 10 words. The markers are indeed frequent in example 6.2, but in fact they constitute their only one word in 5 rather than 9 words out of 10. Exaggerating the prevalence of a handful of features is a common stereotype of youth speech in different languages and locations, from Brazilian Giriya to California female youth language to British Chav speak. Yet, study after study has found that discourse markers are widespread in everyday speech from all kinds of speakers. As Roth Gordon concludes, these Giriya speakers present a coherent linguistic style that makes extensive use of pragmatic expressions to organize textual information, manage interpersonal relationships between speaker and listeners, and convey speaker stance towards content and audience. Standard Portuguese speakers make their judgment of Giriya on social, not linguistic grounds, on the marginalized position of its speakers, and on the way in which Giriya challenges convention. Yes, it will. We're gonna talk about that in another chapter, I believe. We're in chapter 6. Next week is variation in language, which includes class in language, ethnicity in language, gender in language. Yeah, I think we'll be covering the slang of youth. I'm just not sure where. CUL Blue. Okay, guys, I am dead beat. Dead beat. How are you guys? Any questions? Next week, I'm not sure what I'll be covering. Next week, this week, you fell asleep watching TV, Susan? Oregon Valley Girl, you have a good night too. Variation in language is next. And that'll be not this week, but next week. And yes, and then we're going to be talking about age in language with class, ethnicity, and gender. So age, class, ethnicity, and gender will apparently be next week, not this week. Yeah. Good night, y'all. Take care. Sorry there weren't as many Minnesota goodbyes today. Y'all are the best sitting and studying with me. I really appreciate it. I will catch y'all on the flip side. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.